So this is how all the bronze sculptures begin. It's an oil-based clay that I work in called plastiline, terracotta plastiline. It has a couple advantages. It has no water in it, so it never dries out, always workable, and I can get a much higher level of detail with this kind of clay, and you may be able to tell that I like detail. So just to give you an idea of how this is going to work, it's a little disjointed right now, but this sculpture is going to go together, all these elements as one sculpture. It will fit on a base the size of this piece of plywood. So this was a French commander, Dalibou de Montet or Lemoyne de Saint-Helene. These two Mohawks, this guy was called Kren by the Dutch, he was called the Great Mohawk by the French, and they will be positioned right in through here. And behind the open gate, behind the stockade, will be the suggestion of the town. And this is the suggestion of the town, with the horizon effectively being the back wall of the stockade. And the town in question is Schenectady. So the way the story goes, to make sense of what you're looking at, on a bitterly cold night, February the 8th, 1690, 210 French and Indians sent by Count Frontenac from Canada to attack the English. Initially, Albany was the goal. Count Frontenac has just been recalled from France to take over the reins of government in New France, in Canada, for the second time. And despite the fact that he's 70 years old, he is a fiery military guy and decides to go on the offensive. The first French and Indian War has just begun in 1689, the year before, and it's called King William's War. So Frontenac sends out 3 war parties from Quebec to Casco Bay, where Portland now is, from Trois-Rivières to coastal New Hampshire, and from Montreal to Albany. These are the guys that are going to Albany. The trip takes 3 weeks. Winters in 1690, much, much harsher than now. And by all accounts, the trip is so grueling that most of the attackers afterwards declared, had they met any resistance at all, they just would have surrendered, just to get in by a fire and get some food. They were freezing, starving. At the last minute, they decide Albany might be a little too ambitious, so instead they turn west to attack the town on the edge of the frontier. At that time was Schenectady, New York. Schenectady, a stockaded village, 400 Dutch inhabitants, and even though they had been warned by local Mohawks of the likelihood of attack, they apparently chose to ignore the warning. They felt perfectly safe because it was the middle of winter. They thought nobody could possibly reach them. And there was a phrase in New England, which they probably agreed with, and I love this metaphor, the imagery of this. No fear of Indian attack until oak leaves are the size of mouse's ears. Now, as great as that imagery is, it turns out it was completely wrong. They attacked in the winter. So the plan was to attack just before dawn, but by 12 or 1 in the morning that night, the attackers are so cold and frozen they can't wait that long. So they launch the attack, discover that the 2 men entrusted with guarding the town instead are in Dewey Ox Tavern drinking. The gates are wide open, and the only guards are 2 snowmen on either side of the gate. And in all the years of research, this is the only time I've come across a reference to snowmen, so that definitely caught my attention. The attack on Schenectady is clearly devastating. 60 inhabitants are killed in the initial onslaught. 27 captives, 30 to 40 horses loaded with plunder, pulling sleds, all head back up north the day after. They set fire to the town. It's clearly a devastating event for Schenectady. It could have been worse, however. There are 30 local Mohawks in the town the night of the attack, and the Canadian Mohawk kin, of course, don't harm them. And to appease the local Mohawks further, the attackers grant their request to free 60 old men, women, and children. So instead of heading north with probably over 100 captives, only 27. Word gets back to Peter Schuyler, who's the mayor of Albany, of the attack on Schenectady. So he rounds up a force to go in pursuit. They never actually catch them, but they're on the trail. And this is the possible footnote to the story. I think I'm going to include it. Schuyler and his men heading north, follow this, what must be a pretty obvious trail. They run out of food and they're starving and they're freezing, and they come across a band of local Mohawks who are also on the trail in pursuit. And they are gathered around a great kettle cooking over a blazing fire. And they offer Schuyler and his men some of this broth, which is the word they use to describe it, which they have. And then Peter Schuyler writes in his 1690 journal, "They offered us a second helping, but as I glanced over, appeared in the ladle the hand of a Frenchman, which quickly put an end to my appetite." So years ago, I told that story to a good friend of mine who was a great chef, originally from Austria, Eric, owner of the Newfane Inn in Newfane, Vermont. And after I told him that story, he looked at me and he said, "Oh, well, that must be the original French onion soup." So that's the footnote to the story.